Alrighty, so we are going to go ahead and begin. Thank you so much for joining us today for Audition Podcast Editing. My name is Caitlin, and I am a librarian at Harrington Library, and I will be assisted by my chat facilitator, Nikki, today. Please say hi, Nikki.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me. So some ground rules before we get started. Your mics have been muted on purpose. If you have program-related questions you would like to ask, please do so in chat, which can be accessed at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or use the Q&A feature. Your text will only be seen by Nikki or myself, and not all attendees. Any inappropriate behavior will result in your removal from this virtual program. We will try to answer the questions as we go along, but there will be time for Q&A after the lesson is over. A recording of this class will be sent out at a later date. So what are we covering today? We will be covering the basics of editing a podcast using Adobe Audition. We will be focusing more on the actual recording and editing of audio in Audition and some of the basic options available to get you started on your journey of recording, editing your vocals, and adding in background music. If you want to follow along with today's class or when the recording is posted, you can get a free 7-day trial of Audition through the Adobe website, or currently all of the 5 Plano Public Library locations are offering access to Adobe Creative Cloud. So you can access Audition for free anytime at the library with your library card on our Adobe stations. We also have digital creation spaces at both PAR, Haggard, and the Harrington libraries. And these spaces have the entire Adobe Creative Cloud suite on those computers, as well as access to cameras and audio recording equipment. So with that shared, let's get started. Okay, so first we're going to start very basic. What is Adobe Audition? Adobe Audition is a professional grade audio editing software, and it works with destructive and non-destructive mix and edit environments and approaches to multi-track and waveform editing. So what does this mean? A digital audio workstation is used to record, edit, mix, restore, and apply effects to audio. It has multi-track, waveform, and spectral display options for creating, mixing, and editing audio content. And next, what is a podcast? Well, a podcast is a series of episodic digital audio files typically available to the public for listening from the internet. So this could be a digital audio show. It usually has more than one episode. It can be downloaded and subscribed to, so it is automatically downloaded to a device when new episodes are available. And it can really be about any topic and have a variety of different formats. Some of these formats include an interview style, a solo or monologue format. It could be more conversational with a co-host. It could even be a panel of different speakers. It also includes nonfiction storytelling, think like true crime podcasting, or it could be a podcast theater, or it could even be repurposed content. So today we will not be covering in depth all the details of what you should consider before starting your podcast, like determining your topic or specifics of various podcast hosting site options. We are going to focus on some basic editing tools that you can use in Audition to ensure you are delivering a quality sound experience for your listeners. If you are interested in more details like that, there is a great recorded program you can find on the Plano Public Library YouTube page called Intro to Podcasting Workshop that dives more into the logistics of a podcast outside of just editing audio. So before we continue, are there any questions over anything I've introduced so far?
We do not have any questions in the chat at this time.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So hopefully if you're here, you kind of understand some of the basics needed for a podcast, but again, just covering that information real quick. Some of the basic equipment needed for a podcast includes a computer, a microphone, headphones, and some sort of recording software. So today we're focusing on Adobe Audition. but if you're not sure about what the other components you may need, I would recommend making an appointment in our digital creation space and trying out some of the equipment that we have before investing in your own. Can really give you a good entry level into podcasting if you're not sure where to start. But some basics um, about the equipment, specifically about microphones. So there's a ton of different microphones on the market. And if you're going to start a podcast, what kind should you use? So there's two different types of input for a microphone. Now, these are not to be confused with with a type of microphone. This is specifically for input. So you have USB mics, which have a built-in processing hardware, and it's capable of being used with most devices. It's a great option if you're just getting into podcasting, as it can be used with any laptop with a USB port. It's simple and requires no additional equipment like a mixing or soundboard. This microphone could be a dynamic or condenser, but I'll go into more as to why I would recommend a condenser if you're going this route, as dynamic USBs are not very common and tend to have an issue with getting enough sound to the computer. However, if you are going to be recording multiple people in the same room, all using a different microphone, even if your computer has multiple USB ports, it will only record from or recognize one input at a time. This is when you would need a dynamic or condenser microphone connected to a soundboard. So analog mics, and why do these need a soundboard? Well, analog mics are an XLR or a jack input type. So these need to be used with some kind of audio interface to translate the analog input to the digital world. So this is something like a mixing or soundboard that you plug into. So a jack device, it's not something I would recommend. However, it's usually more affordable. It tends to be unbalanced and susceptible to noise interference. Now, a jack input is something that's typically on the ends of headphones. So if you're not sure what that looks like, think about those wired headsets that you used to have. Now, an XLR input, it's mostly used in recording studios and for radio shows. It tends to be higher quality and not as susceptible to noise interference because it is grounded. They also tend to be more expensive. There's a lot more options for customization and upgrading your gear with XLR mics. And so those look like those 3-prong input cords, and they are still commonly used. Now, why do I recommend starting with, with a USB? It's because the USB mics do process sound internally, and analog mics, they do process sound externally. So if you're not starting with a whole lot of equipment, I would start with something fairly basic like a USB mic. So more about microphones. So this is actually getting into the different types, and you've heard me mention dynamic and condenser. So these are two of the main types of microphones that are currently on the microphone marketplace. So you have dynamic and condenser. Dynamic microphones are used mostly in a live setting, and it has a lower frequency for recording. They are non-powered, provide a rich sound, and they're really great because they don't pick up a lot of room noise. It is also the oldest type of microphone, and it's pretty primitive in terms of design. What that means is if you drop it, it's less likely to break. It's a very hardy style mic. Now, condenser microphones, they are usually used in recorded settings. They have a higher frequency for recording, and that does lend itself for getting a clear and natural sound recording. So they are powered, and they tend to be very sensitive. So they are used often in sound-controlled studios. The other thing I will note about these two different types of mics are that both of them can be considered a cardioid microphone, which defines a directional polar pattern of sensitivity towards sound. This really means the highest sensitivity of a cardioid is in the front, with reduced sensitivity on the sides and practically no sensitivity on the back of the mic. So what this means is when you're speaking into a cardioid mic, you're really, if you're ever behind the mic, it's not going to capture any sound. It's that directionality of sound processing. So when you're looking at your microphone, you want to make sure you're paying attention to the polar pattern that is associated with that microphone. There's a bunch of different polar patterns out there. We have a separate program that's all about microphones that you are welcome to look into future programming sessions for. Or again, check out our digital creation space. We definitely have more information about microphones and polar patterns there. So moving on, I would say I would stick with condenser microphones just because, again, they're used primarily for recorded vocals. So now that we've gotten the microphone, which is the most important part of your podcast, introduced, before we do jump into the demonstration, I do want to mention that in this software, we are going to be working with editing. So there's destructive editing and non-destructive editing. So destructive editing does refer to editing that makes a permanent change to your original audio file. And these changes can be made, I will show you in just a moment, in the waveform editor. So destructive editing really does make an immediate visible change in your file. It's ideal for processes like noise reduction and volume leveling and loudness. And you can also process unlimited effects without bogging down your computer. What this means is you will actually get a faster export because it won't require a lot of processing time. However, there are some cons to destructive editing. One is that once you apply an effect, it can be difficult to change. I'm going to walk through more of this in the software, how you can apply effects and undo it, but as you will see, it can become very time consuming as it can only be done in the order that they were made. So non-destructive editing, it uses the computer's processing to play effects and changes on the fly during playback. And so this is great because you can apply a lot of effects in real time, and it's really ideal for interviews and dialogue editing. Your effect order can also be easily changed and added, removed, moved around. While some of the disadvantages of non-destructive editing is that your effects are limited by the device that you're using, your computer and hardware. It's also hard to see how these changes affect your waveform until it's rendered or bounced, which means it can be really difficult for precise audio editing, and it also takes a lot of time for the final export. So that's what we're going to be getting into in Audition. So now that I've gotten that out of the way, I'm going to jump from this PowerPoint into Audition. Are there any questions about anything from the PowerPoint?
There are no questions in our chat.
Thank you so much. Now, remember, if you have any questions or need me to repeat anything at any time, please do utilize the chat feature for that. All right, so this is the Audition workspace. So what are we looking at? So as Nikki has shared in the chat, I'm sure
Caitlin, one
there is
moment. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but before we get into the nitty-gritty of Audition, we actually did have a question come in. What was the name of the microphone that is best for live recording in live settings?
So I think there's a difference with the usage of live. So when you say live, are you still recording or are you on a stage for something that's occurring live?
That is a great question. Let me see if I can get some more clarification here. Just one moment. Okay, I'm not seeing any clarification come through on the question. Oh, I guess, okay, can we clarify both what the difference between like a live sound recording would be versus a recording setting?
Absolutely. So if you're live on stage, that is something like if you're going to a concert, like a Taylor Swift concert, and you're seeing her perform live. So most likely she's using a dynamic microphone because again, it's a sturdy, rich sounding microphone. One moment, sorry. Sorry about that, thank you. So as I said, dynamic microphones are really good for those stage performances, and those are live settings. Now, if you're recording a live stream, if you're recording a podcast that you're also recording and streaming live on YouTube, I would still recommend a condenser microphone, mostly because you're in that recording studio setting. So that is one of the distinctions between the two that I would make is, are you recording something that's in a larger setting with an audience, or are you recording live just with one or two other people for a interview format or a panel format? So really that's a distinction I would make. Does that help?
Do you think that helps? And we actually did have another question come up that I think is a really great question. And it is, are there any online tools for podcasting that would work on something like a Chromebook, or do you need to have software downloaded and installed in order to podcast?
So if I understand the question correctly, if you're just recording vocals or anything for a podcast, do you have to have Audition? No, you do not. You can use pretty much any kind of voice recorder that you have access to. Audition is an editing tool. Yes, you can record in it, but it is at the core of it an editing software. I mentioned earlier in the PowerPoint a digital audio workstation. So there are actually a lot of different open source options available for that, which include things like SoundBridge or BandLab. Or even access to software like Audacity. So here at the library, we don't recommend one over the other, but there are certainly tools that are available for you to edit software and or record in outside of the Adobe Creative Suite. Does that help? Did I answer the question?
Yes, I think that was a great answer. And it looks like for now our chat is clear.
Okay, awesome. Keep the questions coming. I really appreciate it, guys. This class is for you, so we want to make sure you're getting the most out of it. Okay, so we are walking through Audition. So this includes our workspace. So you should see this pretty standard screen here. So we're going to start with the very basics. So at the top here, you have your application menu. And then we have our toolbar directly underneath that. So your toolbar includes things for that waveform, multi-track. And we're going to get a little bit more into these other display options, which include a spectral display and some other display options, but it's these tools right here that I'm going to be hovering over that we're going to use the most. And okay, sorry guys. Okay, I lost track of where I was at, sorry. So I'm hovering over here, this file menu. So this actually allows you to view all the files because you can have more than one file open at a time. Below that, you have your media browser, which just allows you to access different locations for your media. It's also where you can see your effects. So this effects rack right here is where you can see different effects. Underneath that, you have your history. So I mentioned in the description for destructive and non-destructive editing, when you apply anything to your files, that can be accessed or viewed here. If you had video associated with your audio, you could also click video and that would show a video associated. But I would tend to say if you're working with video, you should hop into Adobe Premiere Pro because that will work a whole lot more seamlessly than working with video format in Audition. So this large square in the middle, that is your editor panel. And this is where we will actually see the audio tracks that we either record or upload into the software. And next to it has a mixer format. So when you have an audio track open, you actually see more settings within that. And over on the far right side, we have our essential sound panel, as well as below that, our selection and view tab. And below the editor tab in the middle, you have our level tab. And as we open more things, I'll show things as they pop up. But this is our workspace. Okay, so let's say that we have a recording already made. So how are you going to upload your files into Audition? So a few different ways. You can either go here to File and Open, which should open an open file window, and you should be able to access it from wherever you have saved your file. And if you are going to create new audio, then you can also go to File and New. And this is where it will have some options for multi-track and audio file. We are not going to get into CD layout today at this time. All right, so let's say that we wanted to record our podcast in Audition today. So what does that look like? So from the file menu, we are going to select new and then audio file, or you could use the keyboard shortcut of Control Shift and N. So this new audio file window will pop up. We are going to go ahead and rename it our new audio file. And then you will see that there is a sample rate underneath it. It is recommended to work with a rate of 44.1 Hertz. So it's this option below the 4800. This is the recommended rate for a standard CD quality range, and most computers can safely handle this this resolution without too much lag time. So that's another thing you want to think about when you're creating your podcast or editing it, is how will your listeners have access to your recording, and will it be a quality experience? So underneath that, you will want to select stereo for your channel, and then you can go ahead and keep your bit depth at 32 bits. Once you have those set, you'll click OK. And now we have something to view within our editor panel. Now, if you are going to create a multi-track, so that is in our toolbar here, this multi-track option, so you can click View Multi-Track. This is also a way to select creating a new multi-track session. So we will go ahead and name today's new multi-track session. And again, we're going to have the same thing where we go through and we can select a template. We will select podcast, and it auto-populates the sample rate, bit depth, and the mix from that template. If you want it saved somewhere else, this is also where you can select a new save location. So click OK. And you can see now over in our file manager that we have two things selected in there. And you can go back to one or the other just by double clicking it. So a special thing to note in your multi-track session, you have multiple channels for audio. So if you have previously recorded audio files, you can again drag these from the file manager into one of your open channels. So each of these rectangular different colored sections is a different channel. So even though we have nothing in this one, we could technically drag that into one of the open channels here.
And Caitlin, a quick question, I think, before we get further into how this multi-track session works. We did have a question come in. Can you clarify in what case would you want to use multi-track for a podcast? What exactly is that multi-track option for?
That is a great question, because you would want to use a multi-track session when you are going to add special effects to your podcast. So if you want to have like an opening jingle to your podcast or add any kind of special effects sound, then you would actually want to use a multi-track session. It's not just for multiple vocals, though it is of course great for that. It allows you to place those different effects or different sounds a little bit more cleanly. Does that help? Does that make sense?
Yes, I think that was the perfect answer. And yes, they confirmed that made sense. And right now, we don't have any other questions. Thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay. So let's say that we wanted to record some audio. We're going to jump back into our single recording because I want to show you what that looks like. So with our waveform editor. So the waveform editor is ideal for recording a voice from a single microphone and therefore a single recording. Now, this is your default option that appears from creating a new audio file. So when you're going to record, you first want to make sure that you have your desired recording device connected to the computer. And Audition ideally should detect that hardware automatically and set up the device for recording. However, sometimes it does not select it automatically, and there's an easy way to fix that. all you have to do is actually go up here to file and trying to remember where, edit and preferences. And you can go here to audio hardware. So you can actually make sure that you have your device set here for the input and output. So just in case you have any issue with your device hooking up, that is again how you would make sure that Audition is recognizing the right device. So So when you're ready to record, you want to select this red dot at the bottom of the editor panel. And if you need to pause at any time, that's where you'll click these two lines here that are parallel to each other for the pause button. And that does just pause your recording, and you can hit play or the record button to start it back again. Now, if you do click stop or space, that does end your recording. So we're going to go ahead and record a sample recording. So hello and welcome to Audition Podcasting Editing with the Plano Public Library. We are currently testing recording a single audio track in our waveform editor. Pause. So as you can see, I can still record. Here we go, continuing and stop. So when you click stop, it does highlight that entire track and it sort of puts a force into it. And you'll note that when I paused, you can just click pause to unpause. It works just as well as the play button or the record button. So once you have that complete recorded file, you're like, I need to go ahead and save this. You can go to File and Save As. Now note that this does save it in a WAV format. This is not your final output, and I would not save it in your final output until you're done editing. So yes, I would say unless you're like, this is it, this is your final product, I would not go ahead and change that format. But if you did want to edit in a different software, you can go ahead and select the MP3 format. For right now, I wouldn't, just because we're going to continue working in Adobe. So what does this look like in your multi-track? So you have the multiple channels here. And again, you're going to go through the same steps of making sure that your device is hooked up to your computer. Now, something to note here is in each channel, you have these little letters in the upper right corner of these little rectangles. So you have M, which is for mute, and S, and it's not letting me actually click the R, which is recording. And that would be because for some reason, it's not letting me arm it. So I guess, aha. So these lines here for input and output. So if you want to make sure that these are able to be armed for recording, you want to make sure that these settings are input. I wouldn't so much worry about the last option, but you want to have these set so that you can turn that recording function on. You'll also notice that each of these do have a different label. So if you're the host, that would be your host microphone. And if you're conducting an interview, this is your guest microphone here. Now, sound effects, those are any special effects you're adding in. Music bed, if you have, again, that opening music or any kind of sound effect there, you're going to load that music into that channel. So once these are enabled, you can arm that channel. So we're going to go ahead and record a sample recording in this top channel just to show you what that looks like. So you're going to click that R for recording. Now, just because you arm it does not mean that it's live and that you are recording. You do still have to click the recording button here at the bottom of the editor panel. Okay, so you can also see that since we've activated this channel, we have this lovely bar that's going up and down as I speak because it's recognizing my microphone input. So the colors in this input meter should again range from yellow, green, and red. So green is pretty much a normal sound range. Yellow is kind of the top where you kind of want to hit. Now, if I'm getting really loud and I get into the red color at the very top, that typically may actually mean that I'm speaking too loud and your recording may want to lower that decibel point because it could be too loud for your listeners. So again, you want to create a pleasant listening experience for your attendees. So I'm going to go ahead and show it recording in one of those channels. So we're going to click record. And I recommend giving yourself a few spaces of empty sound at the beginning, and I'll explain why when we edit. Hello and welcome to Audition Podcast Editing with the Plano Public Library. We are currently testing recording a audio track in our multi-track editor. And stop. So the nice thing about clicking stop in this one is you can actually still add more recording to it. It's just pausing because you have multiple things to work with. Now I'm going to go ahead and click M. This M here is a mute option. So you can mute that channel, but I would recommend just turning off recording if you need to stop recording on a channel. It's a little bit easier. Okay. So editing your podcast. So the following edits I'm going to show can be applied to both the waveform and multi-track editor. So we're going to cover the adaptive noise reduction tool, the essential sound panel, and some different features within those. So I would say one of the most important things with your podcast is noise reduction. And what does that look like? So we're going to go back to our first audio file here, and I'm going to show you what that looks like. Okay, so noise reduction. The adaptive noise reduction tool is used for cleaning up sound recordings by reducing and removing background sounds. So with this audio waveform file open, we are going to click that spectral frequency display icon, or we could click Control D. So this is spectral display frequency. This is our pitch display, just to show you the difference between those two, in case you accidentally click one or the other and you're like, what did I just do? Which happens to me a lot. it's very easy to mix up. So you want to see all these different colors when you're working, just because it's a better imagery to help you refine your sound. So what we're doing right now, what our first step to noise reduction is actually capturing a noise print. So a noise print is going to be something, it's a portion of our recording that has ambient room noise, meaning it has no speaking or elements of the recording that should be kept. So we are actually going to zoom in on our recording. So you can do that by on this top bar, dragging it back and forth. You can see this is our entire track, or you can really zoom in to that first beginning noise where we don't have a lot of sound. You can get as close to it as you want. So I may not want that beginning, but maybe this section here. Because it's a shorter recording, I would recommend grabbing a few decimal points. I wouldn't go this tiny, but just because you're going to stretch such a small portion across your entire file. So when you are utilizing this, this tool, which right now this is our My Key selection tool, what we actually want is that time selection tool. So you want to grab probably, I would recommend at least 5, just because that's at least a good chunk of time versus just a 0.1 second, which is very, very tiny. I would even maybe drag a little bit more. And what we're going to do to get that noise print is actually Shift plus P. And you should see this capture noise print window pop up. You can see it's letting you know, caution, this is going to be loaded as your noise print. And that's what we want. So we're going to click OK. And then what you're going to do from there is actually go up to our effects menu. And we're going to go down to that noise reduction and restoration tab. You can see here, this is an alternative method of capturing a noise print. But now that we have that already captured, we want to apply it. So we're going to select the noise reduction process. And it pops up this window for effect noise reduction. Okay, so this really does display a graphic analysis of recording and your noise print. So you could either do Control A to select your entire file, or you can select this button here for select entire file. We're going to go ahead and apply it to everything. But if you needed to only apply it to a specific section of your recording, which does happen, then I would select just that specific portion of your recording to apply it. And I can show you what that looks like after we apply it to the entire track. So our settings here in this window are 50% and 16 decibel points. I do want to mention that too much reduction can cause speech to sound very watery or robotic. So sometimes setting your noise reduction at higher, so it's not quite as much. So something like 85% and reducing by only 10 can actually give you a clear sound result. So at the bottom left of this window, you have this power. So that means that this effect is currently applied. You can also turn it on and off. So what this allows you to do is preview that effect before you save it. So it's really great to make sure that you like what you're doing before you apply it permanently. So if you're not sure, make sure that this power button is green and you listen to it before you apply, just so you don't have to spend a lot of time going back and being like, what did I just do? Why does it sound like that? Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and apply. When we click off, when we select this entire track, you can see it's not that big of a difference, but if we were to Control Z, you can see that there's a little bit more purple here versus Control Shift Z. There's a little bit less purple now, it's more black, so it reduced a lot of background noise in my current recording. So that's where I would start with your podcast audio editing. And as I mentioned, just to apply it to something specific. So let's say that there was an area of a lot of sound and it wasn't me actually speaking. Then I would actually select that specifically. And again, go up to effects, noise reduction process. So that's that Control Shift P. And you could apply it to just that specific section if you needed additional noise reduction, or if you just needed noise reduction on one part of your recording. Are there any questions about that?
So far, the chat is clear. I'll let you know if anything pops up though.
Okay, cool. Just some general tips and tricks for even better results with noise reduction. So just keep in mind, less is often more. Some noise and room tone is really natural for your podcast, and we can usually tune it out pretty easily. We can also notice the absence of such noise if noise reduction is applied too strongly. So again, sometimes instead of trying to remove noise in one pass, try multiple light passes. So for example, you can capture a noise print and apply a noise reduction value of 30%, and then repeat using different noise prints from the file. You can also try different settings. So in that noise reduction window, there is advanced. So there are more options. So this includes things like your spectral decay rate, which are, I wouldn't worry about these just from a basic standpoint. Your standard things here are going to work pretty well for you, but if something isn't working, get into this and just try a few. What matters is that you get the result you're looking for. So I will say that if you are messing with the advanced options, a higher FFT size requires a noise print of longer duration. So what I showed you was actually a very small noise print. So I would actually have to grab more sound to make that really work. And that just allows you to be more precise with your overall noise reduction. Okay, so if there's no more questions about that,
We
I
did
do want
have
to.
a question pop up, Caitlin. I think it's a really good one. So this whole noise reduction process, would this be able to help reduce noise of somebody else speaking if it was captured while they were talking? So if someone was in the background of the room talking and it wasn't supposed to be in the podcast, will this noise reduction help with that?
I would say yes, it should help with that, because what you're capturing in your noise print is the absence of speaking sound, right? Or the absence of your, it's the general room ambience. So you'd want to make sure with the noise print you're grabbing that it's an empty section where your primary speaker and the background noise is not heard. Because when you're taking that noise print, you're applying it really to those emptier sections, those background layers of your recording. Now, if you have some dramatic, like you can hear exactly what they're saying when your main vocal is not speaking, I would actually recommend a different kind of editing for that. And that's a little bit more advanced for at least for what we're covering today. Um, I would try the noise print first, but you can always get in and actually cut them out if it doesn't affect your timing that much. So if you wanted to cut out that sound, you could always use a razor selected clip tool and actually cut that segment of your recording out and merge them together. But noise print really should help with that as long as you're getting a clean sound print.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. I think that helped, and there are no other questions at this time.
No, thank you so much. So that is our noise reduction tools. So we are actually going to jump into our essential sound panel real quick with our remaining time, because I do want to give you these tools. So your sound panel, essential sound panel, is an all-in-one panel to edit, repair, and improve audio. It really is where it allows you to classify your audio as dialogue, music, SFX, which is effects, or ambience to better accomplish the goals of your product. So for the purpose of podcast editing, this panel is useful for evening out sound loudness or applying special effects and clarifying or sometimes repairing dialogue. So sometimes you need to amplify some loudness. Amplifying loudness will even out any distortion in sound levels across the track. So to amplify loudness, first you need to select your track. So just because I want to show you some more tools, I'm going to jump into this multi-track, and I'm going to drag this new audio file into the second channel. And you can see the moment I did that in our essential sound panel, this allows you to classify it here. So this is dialogue. So we are actually going to classify this as dialogue. And here at the top, you can see that it popped up with loudness. And what we actually want to do is expand that loudness. And we are actually going to go ahead and select auto match, which is well, so there's a few preset options here under dialogue. And there's a bunch of different things that you can select, but enhancing your clarity and loudness, there we go, auto match. So this just keeps your vocals even across the track. And it's really tedious to do that manually. So it's great that Audition has this feature to select that automatically. So if you were to zoom in on this track, you should see that there's less ups and downs in the meter. It should be more consistent in your spectral display. So there should be less spikes of loudness. When you hear it, should all be the same kind of loudness. The next feature that we're going to talk about in the essential sound panel is auto ducking. So I mentioned auto ducking because it really allows you to automate the ducking of music or ambient noise against another track. And this is great for allowing greater clarity of dialogue or other elements without disrupting the overall feel of the recording. So it includes duck against, sensitivity, reduce by fades, and options to monitor clip changes or reanalyze content. So ducking against, let's see if I can pull this up. Um, So, trying to remember where this lives. Um, so when you use auto ducking, first you want to select it's under music. That's what it is. Sorry, guys. So this is my test recording. So with this, you're going to select music. And then it has this ducking feature under music for essential sound. So if you wanted to duck any of this sound against one of the others, so that's actually not what I wanted. This is the music. It's okay. Just for today's class purposes. So if you wanted to apply ducking, so what this allows you to do is to adjust the sensitivity against your vocals so that it fades or becomes louder when as you begin speaking. So it helps identify opposing tracks that you wish to highlight. So by adjusting the sensitivity for the point which ducking is triggered, higher and lower sensitivity, settings result in less changes, while a mid-range sensitivity results in more. So the reduce by is the feature that sets how much the music or ambient track is reduced by, which allows you to create more dramatic flair to your podcast or just a more subtle stretch into the next section of your speaking. So by controlling that fading and the speed in which a volume adjustment is enacted, faster being ideal for fast speech and slower being better for background fades, such as voiceover tracks. The monitor clip changes and reanalyzes content, allows for consistent updates to the track as more changes are made outside of the ducking feature. So this is something you can toggle on and off by clicking here, on and off, so that you can apply it when you want it applied. So you can also apply tracks multiple times in a channel. So you could have this on either side of a vocal. That's the nice thing about working in multi-track and having all these different effects here. You just want to make sure that you, again, categorize that effectively. So again, for ducking, so you would want to turn that on. So the sensitivity here, you can select here to duck it against dialogue clips or music clips, special effects or ambience, and then say how much. And this is really something I would recommend playing with to make sure you're getting that kind of effect that you want. You can always start with the standard rate, but again, this can really heighten dramatic, or it can help you get the kind of start you want to your podcast. But it's great for making sure that you don't have that overlap against your vocals if it's just not quite precise enough. Okay, any questions about the essential sound panel? I know we're running up against time, but
I think we have a quick question. It is not necessarily about this essential sound panel, but I do think it's a good one.
okay.
So going back to the topic of background noise during your recording, do you know
Yes.
if there are any automatic tools that will help identify that background noise if you have a very large recording, say it's an hour long, or do you just have to sit and manually play that whole recording to capture background noise?
That's a great question. Nikki, if you can think of anything off the top of your head that is different from my answer, feel free to jump in. So generally when you have that track, for background noise, again, you can see your entire track up here at the top, and it has that spectral wave display down here. So just to, I mean, if you have this display here and you're not seeing a very clear space in between for black for when you're not talking, then that's kind of an easy indicator that you may have some background noise you need to clean up. Now, once you find like a clear piece of sound and you apply your noise print to your entire piece, if you're still seeing a lot of background noise after applying that, that's where you do maybe need to go in and apply noise print a few times. Sometimes it may mean you need to listen to your entire clip or zoom in and just listen to that specific section. But unfortunately, I'm not aware of any feature that automatically identifies that for you without listening to it.
Yeah, I'm also not. I was going to give that same suggestion. It can sometimes be easy to catch those background noises when you're looking at the actual waveform. And just in the basic research I did in the past couple minutes, most people just suggest ensuring that you have a good recording space so that you don't have to go through that process.
But that's a great question.
Yeah, great question. And that's all for now.
Okay, so I know that there's so much that goes into editing for your podcast, but I hope that this does give you a few tools to start with to get your product where you want it to be. I do want to show you how to export your final podcast, and this really will be the same for the most part for an individual audio file as well as a multi-track section. So you will go to File and Export for both options. For an individual one, you will go ahead and select File. So that could be Control-Shift-E. And then you will want to select an MP3 audio. I would just leave the current default settings under that. Make sure it's saving where you want it to save, and then click OK. For a multi-track session, so File and Export, and you'll see that File option isn't available. So you want to make sure that you are selecting the entire session. So what does that look like? It is, you want to select the entire session. So multi-track and okay. Entire session, sorry, multi-track mixdown, then entire session. That will pop up with your export multi-track mixdown. And then here is where you want to make sure that you're selecting your format to that MP3 audio. So what that does is it turns it into one track for your listeners. Okay, and then you'd click OK, and you should have an MP3 audio at the end of that. So we do have a lot of resources outside of this class that can help you with specific podcasting editing. So I highly recommend, if you haven't already, checking out our LinkedIn Learning platform. You can find a lot of different Audition essential training classes, or even classes on producing professional audio and video podcasts. These are great resources, and they are free with your library card. Real quick, before we open it up to any more questions, I do want to share some upcoming programs that we have at the library. These are just a few for the rest of April and the beginning of May. But thank you again for hopping online and attending our Audition podcasting class. Are there any other questions that we can answer for you today before you leave? We really, really do appreciate you attending. There should be a survey that pops up on your computer, if you would fill that out. That really does help us create more classes on topics of interest to you. So if you need more audition help, or if today you're like, I've got more questions, I want to learn more features, you can share that information for us there. So
I just put a lot of links in the chat for you guys, some to some of those LinkedIn learning courses Caitlin was talking about. I haven't seen any other questions come through, but we do have several thank yous for the tips and tricks.
excellent. Well, I really do appreciate y'all's time. If you're still here, I'll just go ahead and mention quickly if you weren't sure about where to get started with podcast hosting. Some general ones we're aware of are Podbean or Libsyn, Liberated Syndication, or Blueberry. So Podbean is a free account option. The rest do have some costs associated, but if you're looking at getting a podcast up and running, definitely look into those options.
Looks like oh, sorry, nope, it's not a question, it's just a thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you all so much. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at caitlint@plano.gov. So y'all have been great. Have a great rest of your day.